Okay, what I'm doing now is trying to figure out the physical mounting of the supercharger. What seems like it should be a fairly easy task gets a little bit complicated when you take into consideration a few things. The supercharger has to spin in a specific direction in order to blow air into the engine and not be trying to pull air out of the engine. There's only so much space this way and this way. And if I mount it over far enough like this, so that it lines up with the pulley, then I'm going to have it charging into one cylinder way more than the other because I don't have a lot of space in between the outlet on the supercharger and the inlet on the engine. I'm going to try to keep the supercharger centered, and then I'm going to extend this out some. The support for the top of the supercharger will actually be the intake manifold for the carburetor. I'm also hoping to be able to build the lower part of the intake so that it has some sort of a cooling effect. I don't know that I'd actually call it an intercooler because, yeah, it's not going to have the full effect of an intercooler. One of the things that makes this difficult is that you have to be able to get at these bolts here. All right, instead of a whole bunch of talking, I'm going to remove the intake manifold, and then I'm going to try to mock something up out of cardboard. It might not work at all, but I'm going to give it a go. Cardboard is a lot cheaper than aluminum. Something like that. To find the centers. We need the distance from here to here to be 109 centimeters. Wait, millimeters. 110, we'll call it 110. Piece number 2. So the supercharger is going to sit here. Call that 4.5 inches. So how far can I come out before these bolts become an issue? It's pretty close, actually. It's not a lot of room. I can angle that up some. All right, so that's gonna sit like that. And there's gonna be a piece of aluminum that goes from this flange to the cylinder head studs. And that's gonna be both the top bracket and also the intake manifold. This is the idea. This socket represents a spacer that I will make. So each one of these will have a spacer, and I'll get a long bolt to go through the manifold into there, and on the top ones there will be long bolts that go all the way through into there. All right, so on this side of the intake manifold, there's going to be a cover, and the cover is going to be there so that I can actually bolt the supercharger on. The supercharger has threaded holes that go in through here, so this is going to sit on like this, and I will have to take this cover off, reach in, put the bolts in for the supercharger, tighten them up, and yeah, then be on my merry way. All right, I don't know if you guys can see what I'm doing here, but basically I'm trying to figure out if I can put the nuts exposed outside of the box on the bottom. So basically have it so that it's like this, and then I tighten the nuts from here. So one set of nuts inside, one set of nuts outside. I just realized I'm trying to figure out how to make this manifold, and I think the easiest way would be for me to have a sheet of metal that actually went down here. You can see here that if I did that, I would be obstructing some of the passage. And then I get looking at the factory manifold. So yeah, I don't think I have anything to worry about. I'm going to probably build the intake so that I have, yeah, so that I have it like that. I'm going to modify the one that I've already made so that it kind of fits with my new idea. This is going to take a lot of figuring. Kind of think I want to keep the volume fairly small inside of there so that it responds quickly. The reason why I ran in the house is because Megan sent me a message saying that this had arrived. Well, she said a heavy small parcel had arrived. This is my angle plate. This means I can bore out my cylinders. Well, means I can attempt to bore out my cylinders. Yesterday I went out and picked up $240 worth of aluminum. I got some 1/2-inch bar stock. I've got some 1/4-inch stuff. Oh my goodness. And then I got some 1-inch round bar and 1/2-inch round bar. And also down here, which you guys can't see, is a 0.80 inch sheet. Most of this stuff is for the manifold and then some additional pieces just to have some extra. This is 6-inch by 1/4 inch. And I'm going to make basically the top mount and the beginnings of the intake manifold on the top. And that way I'll be able to actually hang the supercharger from the bottom. I'll be able to mount it. What I'm trying to figure out now is how far over the shaft needs to go in order to line up with the supercharger drive pulley. So the drive pulley is going to be the drive coupler. So that's about 3 inches, 2 3/4 inches. The reason why that's important is because I need to make sure that I can go over 3 inches here without hitting. So if I go 3 inches off center, is that gonna, oh no, I can go way over. Now that I know that isn't going to be a problem as far as fitness goes, I can now figure out how far I want the supercharger to be over. I think the best thing that I can possibly do is have it over as far as possible without it running into the hull. Alright, so this is going to be 1/4 inch, yeah. I'm going to have to do some I'm gonna have to do some interesting stuff. The carburetor might actually be mounted here. The problem with mounting this like this is that if the ski, not if the ski, when the ski ends up upside down in the water, if you're pulling air from here, there's very likely to be that much water. So the plate needs to be a minimum of 6.5 inches. And a maximum of 7 3/4. All right, so now I'm going to mark out the material. All right. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to mark this line here. This will all make sense in a minute, or maybe it won't. For anyone who does layout work, this definitely will not make sense even once I do it, but you guys will see where I'm going with this. I'm going to use this as a template to figure out the outside shape or the outside pattern. That doesn't matter as much, so now I don't care if the holes are terribly accurate. It's a good thing I drilled the holes out bigger than I needed to, because it still just fits. Unlike some of the cool kids on YouTube, I don't have a tabletop bandsaw. So I'm gonna see if I can do it like this. That took 10 minutes. What I'm trying to do now is figure out if the edge of this plate is parallel with the studs, and I'm trying to figure out if they are parallel with the pulley. Because if I end up mounting the supercharger so that it's crooked like this or like this, the belt is going to want to jump off. So I need to make sure that everything is true. 6 millimeters, 5 and a bit. So we are very, very, very close. That's good enough. There's the first look at how the mounting is going to work. I'm going to have to make some sort of extension to make the pulley actually line up with the driven pulley. But yeah, now that that's in place, I can kind of figure out the rest of my nonsense. What I'm kind of thinking is that the face of the intake manifold is going to be out here somewhere. So if I just use a thick plate of metal on the outside, I can actually mount a tensioner, a belt tensioner, to the outside of the manifold, and yeah, kind of get two birds stoned at once. It would have been really nice if the inlet and the outlet on the supercharger were the same. That way I could have just put one piece of metal on the other and yeah, match them up, but they are not the same. As you can see, the holes do not line up in any sort of way. So I've moved on to the next step, which I've just created in my head, and so it is the next step, and that is to bolt this piece that I cut off onto the reeds, and that follows the plane down so that I know where these two pieces will intersect. That is the center. 6.7. All right, so this will be the center of the bolt hole. What's going on here? This one's got, oh, this bolt is, oh shit. I just noticed that one of the bolts that came out of my supercharger has some aluminum around it. Not just some, a bunch. Which hole did this bolt come out of? That's not good. Okay, I think this is all I'm going to get done tonight. I need to do some video editing. So let's have a look and see what we've got. This is as far as I'm going to make it with this project today. I've got these 2 plates built. The next step is to build another plate here, which will have the holes in it to let the air through. And it's going to intersect with this plate and create a fillet, so I will have a nice strong weld. Once I've got that part drilled out and I can mount it onto the engine, then I can make the end cap for this side. Somehow the supercharger is going to need to be bolted on there. I could actually weld the supercharger in place, and if I ever need to remove it, then I could mill it off. That's what's happening. It's getting welded on. I've just made up my mind. I wanted to thank everyone for sharing their ideas and suggestions in the comments. I really appreciate that. I know sometimes I might come across as a know-it-all when I'm responding, but yeah, I just get really excited when I start talking about mechanical stuff, designing stuff, and different ideas that I have. So yeah, I hope I don't come across too much as a know-it-all. I'm not sure what video I'm going to put out next. I was hoping to get some stuff done on the 1100 cylinders. I told you guys in the last video that I had got my angle plate and that I was going to start boring out the cylinders. Unfortunately, I've decided to order a coaxial dial indicator so that I can find the center of the bores more accurately. After putting as much time and money into it as I have, I didn't want to go half-assed and screw up the cylinders just because I was impatient. So I've ordered the coaxial dial indicator, and it's supposed to be here next Tuesday. So very likely the next video that you're going to see is another 650 supercharger intake manifold build. That is going to do it for this one. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.